Hello everyone, this is Andrew from the Wyoming Dinosaur Center and this is Fossil Friday. As you can see, I'm mixing things up a little bit today, or am I? Alright, thanks, you can go. Now you probably assume that was me with the puppet and camera because, well, that's the sort of thing that I do. The important thing is to never jump to conclusions, never assume anything 100% for certain. And there's no better example of that than our fossil today, or at least the specimen that it's from. Let me explain. So what we have right here is what we call a butcher's bill. All the bones that are colored in that festive green because of a particular holiday today are all the bones that we found for a particular dinosaur called the GB specimen, a kind of sauropod or an apatosaurine. More on that later. So you can see we found a pretty good section of the specimen. Lots of the chest, parts of the tail, a good portion of the neck, and a few toe bones here and there. All in all, pretty complete. Now, this specimen in particular is the subject of our Fossil Friday for this reason right here. This fantastic bone that you can see right in front of me. This bone has these very deep gouges right into the surface. So if I'll zoom in a little bit closer so you can see those. Very deep grooves running along the surface of this bone. And it was pretty easy for us to figure out exactly what was going on there, because if I take this replica of a tooth from an Allosaurus found right here on our property, it fits very nicely in that groove. So we can jump to conclusions right there and say that this is a tooth mark left behind on the surface of the bone by the teeth of a big meat-eating dinosaur. Maybe not necessarily an Allosaurus, although that's the most likely candidate, but a large flesh-eating animal just digging its teeth into the surface and leaving behind those marks. So you can put together a pretty dramatic story from that, right? Let's do a dramatic reenactment. So you have a nice big sauropod wandering along, when it encounters a big flesh-eating animal, and then it attacks, and death, 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 die, die, struggle, struggle, carnage, flesh, all that good stuff. Pretty dramatic story, right? Well, that's the assumption that a lot of people would jump to when they find tooth marks on bones, because it's a really exciting one. But let's look a little bit more in depth. So that bone in question, where did it come from on the body? Well, let's take a quick look and we'll zoom in here. That bone that I showed you is part of the ilium. So, little anatomy lesson. There are three bones that make up the hip. The ilium, the pubis, and the ischium. These three bones together make a sort of central point in the hips that keep everything together. And you have an ilium too. We all share the same general anatomy. The ilium is the bone they can feel jutting out right here when you're doing your hip thrusts and all that sort of thing. So, with this bone being part of the ilium of the animal, that's a really hard point to access on the body because it would have been covered with lots of muscle and skin and all that sort of thing. So, keep in mind this skeletal perspective as we grab our model again. The ilium would be right in here, covered with a lot of dense muscle, maybe some fat, and lots of skin. So if you were an attacking animal like an Allosaurus, it would be really hard to access that part with your teeth if you were attacking this animal. But we do have tooth marks on the bone, so what does that mean? Well, most of the time when we find tooth marks on bone, we can't tell exactly when they occurred. They could be the result of a fight, depending on where you find them. But judging by how many tooth marks we find on this particular bone, it tells us that this was likely a scavenging event. This Allosaurus found the Diplodocus or the Apatosaur, more on that in a little bit, wherever it happened to just drop dead, and then was scavenging the carcass for any bits of meat that it could get off of. And whatever happened to be left happened to be close to the ilium. It bit into that portion and left its tooth marks behind. Now, is that as dramatic of a story? Well, admittedly, not really. But in science, we can't just jump to conclusions. All we can do is use our evidence to get the most logical assumptions. So in this case, it made the most sense for this to be a scavenging injury. The animal found it just because there's not good leverage for an attack like that to happen. Now, is that the whole story? Well, no, not necessarily. Evidence could be found that could change that. And there's actually a lot that we don't know about this particular dinosaur. See, you want to talk about jumping to conclusions. We thought for the longest time that this was, well, he's not cooperating. It's like, that's his tail. Isn't that nice? We assumed for the longest time that this was an Apatosaurus or Diplodocus, one of those big sauropod dinosaurs. But now we've had a really good chance to look at this particular specimen, and we're realizing that there's something different. There's something that we don't quite know. We're not able to figure out about this sauropod. And what exactly does that mean? We don't know. And I think we'd better save that for another episode of Fossil Friday. So, from all of us here at the Wyoming Dinosaur Center, thank you for stopping in. Like this video, comment, share it, get the word around. All of us here at the Wyoming Dinosaur Center wish you a happy St. Patrick's Day. And from me personally, this is Andrew, keeping your Friday fossiliferous.